They say brilliance can walk right past you without a suit, a title, or even a business card. But what if the most capable person in an entire skyscraper was the one scrubbing its floors? On a brisk Monday morning in downtown Phoenix, the marble-floored lobby of Braylock Global Freight thrummed with the usual mix of ambition and caffeine. The click of heels echoed against the walls, conversations about deadlines floated through the air, and coffee cups were clutched like lifelines. The day was already in motion, people rushing to meetings, phones glued to their ears, until something unexpected stopped Elias Morton, the company's CEO, dead in his tracks. It wasn't a fire alarm. It wasn't a sudden commotion. It was a voice. Not just any voice, this was sharp, melodic, confident, and speaking perfect Mandarin. The sound seemed to slice through the lobby noise, so unusual and precise that Elias felt it in his chest before his brain caught up. He turned, scanning for one of the international sales reps or a visiting client from Beijing. Instead, he saw her. A woman in a dark teal janitor's uniform, standing by the interactive lobby directory, her short braids pulled neatly into a ponytail. She was speaking to an older man in a wool coat, who looked utterly lost but now entirely relieved, thanks to her calm gestures and fluid explanations. Elias frowned slightly, not in disapproval, but in surprise. He'd seen her before, somewhere in the periphery of late-night office cleanings, always polite and silent, never drawing attention to herself. Her name escaped him. In fact, he wasn't sure he'd ever heard her speak at all, until now. And then, before Elias could approach, the scene changed again. She finished with the Mandarin-speaking visitor and turned to a delivery driver holding a clipboard. Without pause, she shifted into flawless Spanish, giving directions with the ease of someone ordering lunch in their mother tongue. The driver nodded, "Sí, gracias," and went on his way. Elias was still processing that when another vendor approached, this time with mislabeled conference supplies. She smiled faintly and corrected him, in French. Perfect French. The man chuckled, muttered an appreciative merci, and followed her instructions. 3 languages. 3 different people. All within a minute. Elias felt a flicker of something in his chest, not quite guilt, but close. 2 decades in global trade, he had built international divisions, hired entire translation teams, and spent small fortunes on cross-cultural consultants. Yet, here stood someone in his own building who could do in a morning what others needed entire departments for, and she'd been cleaning offices under his nose for years. He took a step forward. "Excuse me." She turned to him, startled but composed. "Yes, sir." "That was Mandarin you were speaking?" "Yes, sir." "And you're fluent?" "Yes." She tilted her head slightly. "Also Spanish, French, Portuguese, German, Italian, Arabic, Swahili, and I read Latin, but I wouldn't call myself fluent in that one." Elias blinked, as if she'd just recited the winning lottery numbers. "You're telling me you speak 9 languages?" "Yes, sir." "No pride, no boast, just fact." "What's your name?" "Camille Durant." "Ms. Durant, are you free for a few minutes?" Her brow furrowed, cautious. "Now?" "Yes. I'd like to speak with you in my office." She hesitated, just for a breath, the reflex of someone who had spent years being unseen. Then she nodded. They stepped into the elevator. As the doors slid shut, Camille spoke quietly. "I've worked here 12 years. Never thought I'd be going up to the top floor." Elias smiled faintly. "You might be surprised how fast things can change." He didn't know it yet, but this was about to be the understatement of the year. By the time they reached the 19th floor, the air felt different. Cooler, sharper, with the subtle scent of citrus polish and leather. Camille walked quietly beside him, taking in the glass walls, the skyline spilling out beyond them, and the way employees glanced up as they passed. Some looked puzzled, a few raised their brows. Inside his office, a space dominated by a massive world map dotted with colored pins, Elias gestured for her to sit. She folded her hands neatly in her lap, gaze sweeping the room not with awe, but with quiet assessment. "I'll be honest," Elias began, leaning forward. "I didn't expect to have this conversation today. But I just heard you switch between 3 languages like it was breathing, and I need to understand, how does someone like you end up cleaning offices here?" Camille's eyes flicked toward the window before returning to his. "You want the truth? I wouldn't have asked otherwise." She nodded once. "Born in Dayton, Ohio. My father was a machinist, my mother a nurse's aide. They didn't have much, but they pushed education like their lives depended on it. I got a full scholarship to Ohio State, majored in linguistics, halfway through a master's degree when my mom got sick. I came home to care for her. 6 months later, my dad died of a heart attack. Everything fell apart." Her voice was steady, but the air between them seemed to grow heavier. "I had a baby. No money. The father didn't stick around. I worked wherever I could, grocery stores, nursing homes, temp jobs. Eventually, a custodial supervisor here offered me night shifts. It paid just enough to keep the lights on and let me pick my daughter up from school. That's how I ended up here." Elias listened without interruption. "But I never stopped learning," she continued. "I borrowed textbooks. Listened to recordings. Read newspapers in 5 different languages. It's the one thing I do that still makes me feel like I matter." There was no self-pity in her tone, only a steady truth. Most people never ask. They see the uniform and, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Elias leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of her story settle in. "Camille, have you ever thought about doing something else?" She shrugged lightly. "It's hard to dream when the rent's due." Silence stretched between them, charged with unspoken things. Then Elias reached for his notebook, jotting something down. "What are you writing?" she asked. "An idea," he said simply, though one idea was already taking shape in his mind, and it wasn't small. That moment was only the beginning. What happened next would shake not just Camille's world, but the entire company. And by the time it was over, every single person in that building would know her name, whether they liked it or not. That same afternoon, while budget meetings and vendor calls ate away at the hours, Elias couldn't shake Camille from his mind. Her voice, her composure, the casual way she rattled off 9 languages, it kept replaying like a song he couldn't turn off. By mid-afternoon, he was back in the elevator, descending to the service level where the air was warmer and smelled faintly of cleaning solvents and cardboard. The walls were scuffed from carts and hand trucks, the kind of place most executives never stepped foot in. Camille was restocking microfiber cloths when he appeared at the door. She glanced over her shoulder, startled. "You came down here?" He smiled faintly. "Couldn't stop thinking about our conversation. Listen, I have a favor to ask." Her brow lifted. "What kind of favor?" "There's a meeting upstairs, delegation from our Sao Paulo office. They came early, and our translator bailed. Can you step in?" Camille paused, as though considering whether to call his bluff. "Portuguese?" "Yes. I can do that." Minutes later, they were in conference room 7B. 4 Brazilian executives sat at the table, awkwardly scrolling through their phones. Camille walked in without fanfare, greeted them in smooth, flowing Portuguese, and began bridging the conversation as if she'd been preparing all week. Elias leaned against the wall, watching the room change. Shoulders dropped. Smiles surfaced. The visitors no longer looked like guests, they looked like partners. At one point, one of them cracked a joke in Portuguese, and Camille fired back with a witty reply that had the entire table laughing. Elias didn't catch the words, but he understood the shift. She wasn't just translating. She was building trust. When the meeting ended, one of the executives turned to him and said in accented English, "She's better than anyone we've worked with this year." Where did you find her? Elias glanced at Camille, who was already stacking empty coffee cups onto a tray. Right here, he replied. Back in the hallway, he caught up with her. Ever done professional translation before? She shook her head. Only helped in hospitals and government offices. No certificates, no time for school. My daughter needed me more. And where is she now? Elias asked. 26. Nurse in Tempe. Paid her own way through college. Stubborn like her mama. For a moment, the titles and floors and years of hierarchy dissolved. They weren't CEO and janitor. They were just two parents swapping quiet pride. Camille returned to her shift, 2 more floors left to clean before the handoff. But before she left, she said something Elias didn't expect. I didn't do anything special today. He raised an eyebrow. That's not how it looked to me. She smiled faintly and walked away, her cartwheels squeaking against the tile. That night, Elias sat in his car long after the parking lot had emptied, headlights off, hands resting on the steering wheel. He thought about the endless strategies pitched in boardrooms to expand globally, the consultants hired to diversify talent, the thousands spent on recruiting. All while a gold mine had been mopping floors 2 levels below his office. And the question hit him like a challenge. Now that you know she's here, what are you going to do about it? The next morning, Camille's day began like any other, until her supervisor, Ron, appeared with an unusual request. Mr. Morton wants to see you again. Her first thought, what did I do wrong? Ron shook his head. Didn't say. Just told me to send you up. As she made her way toward the elevator, something felt different. People glanced up from their desks as she passed. A few whispered. One receptionist even smiled as if she knew something Camille didn't. When she stepped into Elias's office, he was standing near the window, black coffee in hand, staring out over the city. Come in, he said without turning around. She closed the door and waited. I've been thinking, he began, placing his mug down, about how many people never get a shot, not because they're not good enough, but because nobody ever looks twice. Camille said nothing. She'd heard speeches before. Speeches didn't pay rent. I want to create a new position, he continued, one this company badly needs but doesn't exist yet, cultural liaison for international affairs. Someone who can handle global visitors, vendors, documents, all the cultural nuances we keep fumbling. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You're serious? As serious as it gets. I don't have a degree. You have something better, lived experience, commitment, fluency in 9 languages. You think I care about a piece of paper? Why me? She asked finally. Elias held her gaze. Because yesterday morning, I watched you solve 3 problems in 3 languages before most people had their first cup of coffee. And because I'm tired of walking past people doing twice the work for half the credit. She crossed her arms. You know people are going to talk. I don't care. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Then she exhaled slowly. I've never had an office job. Never had a title. You'll learn fast. I don't own clothes for this kind of thing. I'll have HR send you a clothing stipend. A dry chuckle escaped her. You've thought of everything. I'm trying. She hesitated, then asked, what about my shift downstairs? Who replaces me? We'll find someone, Elias said, but no one can replace you. Her gaze dropped to her hands, then back to him. You sure this isn't some kind of favor? This is overdue recognition. Her eyes glistened, but she blinked the tears away. All right then, she said firmly. Let's see what I can do. They shook hands. It wasn't just a handshake, it was a line in the sand. By Wednesday, word had traveled faster than the elevators. The janitor from the night shift had been promoted to an executive position. Nobody knew the full story, only fragments. That she spoke multiple languages. That the CEO had chosen her personally. Whispers spread like wildfire. Maybe she used to work for the government. Maybe she had an intelligence background. Some people smiled and said, good for her. Others, not so much. In the staff lounge, two marketing assistants hunched over their salads. I've got a master's in international business, one said. Been waiting 2 years for a promotion. She was scrubbing toilets last week. Her friend shrugged. Maybe she knows something we don't. That quiet resentment seeped into boardrooms and Slack channels. It was the kind of energy Camille could feel the second she walked into her modest new office on the 12th floor. Just a desk, a plant, and a computer she hadn't touched yet. HR had finished onboarding, and she'd asked if she could keep her night uniform, not to wear, but to remind herself where she came from. That afternoon, Camille's first official meeting was with Victor Rains, head of international operations. He walked in with a clipboard and a face so tight it could cut glass. No handshake. No small talk. So, you're the new liaison, he said, making the title sound like a punchline. That's what I'm told, Camille replied evenly. You have experience in corporate environments? Only from the outside looking in. He didn't smile. I've got reports from Milan, contracts from Dubai, and a vendor problem in Sao Paulo that's already costing us money. Think you can manage all that? She stood, her posture calm but unyielding. I'll need a few hours to review everything. But yes. Victor dropped the folder onto her desk like it weighed 50 pounds and walked out without another word. Later that evening, Elias stopped by. How's day one? Camille leaned back in her chair. I've had worse. Victor give you a hard time? He doesn't scare me. Elias smirked. Figured as much. She hesitated before speaking again. Why now, Elias? Why me? You could have just handed me a bonus and moved on. He leaned against the doorframe. Because I see myself in you. Her brow arched. You were a janitor. No. But I was overlooked. Came from a town no one visits. My dad fixed cars. I worked 3 jobs to get through school. People thought I didn't belong in rooms like this. Camille nodded slowly. Now you're the one deciding who gets in. Exactly. I'll be honest, I'm nervous, she admitted. Good. Means you care. There are people who hate this already, she warned. They'll get over it. Or they won't. Either way, we're moving forward. The next day, Camille sat at her desk flipping through a file when a sharp knock at the door pulled her from the paperwork. Standing there was Eleanor Blackwell, a senior board member with a reputation for slicing through egos like a scalpel. She was in town from Dallas and wore a suit so crisp it practically had edges. Miss Durant, she said, not quite smiling, I'd like a word. Camille followed her to a small conference room on the 17th floor. The air inside felt cooler, colder, even. Eleanor placed a thick folder on the table and gestured for Camille to sit. I've reviewed your file, Eleanor began, tapping the folder. No degree. No corporate training. No management certifications. That's correct. You were a janitor here 3 weeks ago. I was. Eleanor folded her hands. Help me understand how someone with your background is now overseeing high-level international affairs. Camille didn't flinch. Because I speak 9 languages. I understand the cultures we work with. I've already fixed 2 vendor contracts and ended a 3-month stall in our Morocco deal. I also helped secure a verbal agreement with our Brazilian partners that legal will finalize next week. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. You think this company can run on instinct and charm? No, ma'am, Camille replied evenly. I think it should run on results. That landed. For the first time, Camille saw Eleanor hesitate, just for a second. I don't need to be liked, Camille added. But I do need to be useful. And I am. Eleanor closed the folder with a slow snap. You're a gamble. My whole life's been one, Camille said softly. When the meeting ended, Camille didn't go straight back to her office. She walked out of the building and crossed the street to a bench. From there, she stared up at the glass tower that had once been just another stop on her night route. For years, she'd passed through those doors in silence, wondering if anyone noticed her at all. Now they all noticed. And some didn't like it. She pulled out her phone. Hey, Ma, her daughter answered. Everything okay? Yeah. Just needed to hear your voice. They talked about groceries, the neighbor's dog, and a movie her daughter wanted to see. It was nothing big, but it steadied her. After they hung up, Camille sat in silence for another minute before standing, squaring her shoulders, and walking back inside. By the next morning, word of her meeting with Eleanor had somehow spread. To everyone's surprise, Camille didn't back down. She arrived early, led a team meeting, and took a call with the German office, no translator needed. She was calm, sharp, and unbothered. Later that day, a handwritten note appeared on the whiteboard outside her office, "We see you." No signature. Just 3 words that meant more than the most expensive bouquet. And something started to change. People began coming to her, not just for translation, but for advice, confidence, even courage. She became the person interns wanted to practice presentations with. She never talked down to anyone. One day, a shy Vietnamese intern named Bao asked, "How did you learn all those languages?" "1 word at a time," she told him. "Same way you will." The shift began quietly, like a low tide, but it didn't stay quiet for long. Camille's impact started to ripple across departments. One afternoon, Elias joined her for coffee in the break room. "I've been hearing good things," he said. She sipped and smirked. "Been trying to ignore the bad ones." "You're making waves." "That a good thing?" "Here. It means you're doing something right." They stood in companionable silence for a moment before Elias spoke again. "I've been thinking about starting a training program for internal talent, especially people in non-desk roles. I'm willing to bet there are more Camilles in this building." "There are," she said without hesitation. "They just haven't been seen yet." He tilted his head. "Want to help me build it?" She smiled. "Already started in my head." By the end of the month, the pilot launched under a new name, Bridgepoint Initiative, designed to give workers in every department access to language training, leadership mentorship, and cross-department visibility. It was Camille's idea. The program caught fire. People who had been invisible for years suddenly had a path forward. Some found new roles. Some found new confidence. And quietly, the company began to feel different. A few weeks later, Camille was invited to speak at the National Logistics Leadership Summit in Cincinnati. She didn't craft a feel-good speech. She told the truth. "I was never just a janitor," she began. "I was fluent. I was capable. I was ready. But nobody ever looked long enough to see it. So the next time you walk past someone without a title, ask yourself, what are you really missing?" The room went still. Then it erupted in applause. On her way out, a young man approached her, eyes wet. "My mom's a housekeeper," he said. "She speaks 5 languages. I used to be embarrassed to tell people that." Camille touched his arm. "Don't ever be ashamed of where you come from. The only thing to be ashamed of is staying blind to brilliance." Back at Braylock Global, Camille kept doing what she did best, her way. She never performed for the sake of proving herself. She simply worked, with the same quiet diligence she had in her janitorial days, only now with a bigger reach. On a Monday morning, she walked into a meeting with a delegation from Morocco. The North African expansion had been stuck for months over mistrust and miscommunication. She greeted them in fluent Moroccan Arabic. The shift in the room was immediate. People leaned forward, smiled, listened more closely. Afterward, one of the Moroccan partners touched his chest, a traditional sign of respect. "No one has ever done that for us, in our language, not like that." Camille nodded. "You matter. That's all." By midweek, Elias made another quiet move. He had the plaque outside the main training room removed. In its place, a new sign was mounted, the Durant Room. No speeches, no ribbon cutting. Just a silent recognition that spoke volumes. Later that day, Camille found an envelope on her desk. Inside was a handwritten note. "I used to think I'd be invisible forever. But today, I stood a little taller because of you. Thank you." No signature. Just proof that people were watching, and needed to see what was possible. Not everyone warmed to her. Some still whispered, still doubted. But over time, even the skeptics had to acknowledge results. She caught translation errors in old contracts that had cost the company thousands. She navigated tense cross-cultural calls without a single misunderstanding. And she did it all without asking for credit. Elias noticed. One evening, as he passed her office, he paused. She was alone, reviewing documents with the same focused patience he'd seen in her the first day. "Camille," he said from the doorway. She looked up. "You've got a story," he continued, "and now you've got a platform." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she opened her desk drawer and glanced at the old teal uniform she kept folded there. Not to remember where she'd been, but to remember what it had cost to get here. The truth is, this wasn't just Camille's story anymore. It belonged to every unseen, underestimated worker who had ever been passed over. Her promotion wasn't a gift. It was a door. And she was determined to leave it open. Because in her words, talent has no dress code. Intelligence doesn't need permission. And brilliance can walk right past you holding a mop. If you've ever been overlooked, keep going. The right person will see you. And when they do, don't just take your seat at the table, bring more chairs.